So this is from an article by Tony Burns, no relation, Marx, Automation, and the Politics of Recognition Within Social Institutions. I'll drop that in the chat in case anyone feels like reading that. And I'm not going to read an entire academic article to you because that's boring, but a couple of chunks from it. He says at one point that Marx observes that a new machine or item of technology, far from becoming a labor-saving device, is likely to increase the toil of the worker who is compelled to use it. He states that it becomes a sort of torture since the machine does not free the laborer from work, but deprives the work of all interest. Maybe I can find that line in here so we can all look at it. Marx observes. Am I an idiot? Hold on. Okay, I am an idiot. We just have to accept the fact that I'm an idiot. And he goes on in the same piece. So like when he talks about technology not being a labor-saving device, but something that increases toil, I mean, think about what has happened. We have been sold this bill of goods for quite some time now, that technology and all the things coming to us from Silicon Valley, we're going to make our lives easier. But what we have seen is that it has in many ways made our lives harder. It's made us have to work more. And this is something Marx was aware of, that there isn't a direct correlation between advancement in labor technology and a progression of, human labor time and disalienation. If anything, as Marx points out, this happens a lot like I think a lot of us might associate this with the Paris manuscripts from 1844. As technology increases, and this is basic stuff, you guys know this, but we go from this world where, maybe I used to be a shoemaker, and to be a shoemaker, I had to learn every facet of the process of creating a shoe. I had a lot of different skills that were very specialized to me that meant that I was the only person that can make a shoe this way. Fast forward to like more of a Fordist industrial model. Now we're splitting up all the parts of the shoes. So rather than being someone who understands how to make a shoe, I make a buckle. And every day I just make the one buckle. I'm sort of being de-skilled as I'm having to work more to make less. So in this way, I'm serving a technology and putting more of my humanity into that thing, becoming alienated from myself or my own capacity. And of course, yada, yada. I'm also in competition with people around me because there's less resources. So Marx points this out, but Marx also connects this to automation. So this is another quote from the Tony Burns article, which I linked. It says, Marx suggests that for a variety of reasons, partly having to do with automation, workers in that society live an alienated life, or a life that's not appropriate for human beings. He assumes that in the communist society of the future, which will continue to be an automated society, and this is important, Marx's idea isn't that technology develops and then the revolution happens and then technology stops. It's not the idea. The idea there is that technology develops, but the contradictions within those technological developments, especially as they affect working people, leads to political change and the appropriation of those technologies by the people. But it says, he assumes that in the communist society of the future, which will continue to be an automated society, provided that these things are organized in an appropriate manner, the quality of life will be much higher. So, according to Burns, not me, other Burns, according to Burns, Marx imagines a future in which automation will lead to a higher quality of life. In that society, the problem of alienation will be overcome, and all the members of that society will be able to flourish. Moreover, in that society, automation, far from being an obstacle to a better life, is what will make such a life possible. Now, quoting Burns on Marx, or I guess Burns on Marx, maybe me and this guy should start a podcast called Burns on Marx. But to be all Burns on Marx here, I just think it's important to remember that, like, this is, if we are leftist or left adjacent, it does not mean we have to agree with everything that Karl Marx said. It does not mean that we can't be critical in reading the work of someone who lived in the 19th century. But I think it is important to note that in the work of the theorist at the heart of, contemporary leftism, Marx is imagining a world in which automation can be reappropriated by the people to disalienate humans and make lives make our lives less crappy. So when I, in the recent video, talk about the potential for AI, and I know you don't know what's going on inside my head and you wouldn't want to know, but this is the stuff I'm thinking of, this is the sort of stuff that I'm thinking of here. There's another piece, and I don't fully agree with the conclusions of this article, but I think it could be an interesting one to look at if you're curious about these questions. I'll share it in the chat as well. This is from eFlux. Yeah, and I see that Isla Anderson in the chat says, I used to belong to the RDC when read our contemporary, the party critique, and the chapter on automation capital because Sockdems in UK love Aaron Bastani. Yeah, I mean, Bastani is someone who I don't know his work very well. I think that I get and agree with a level of what he is getting at. I've not read his luxury communism book, but so this is from, I'll probably say his name wrong. Yaku. It's from eFlux, and it's a really interesting piece that goes on to consider the work of like Simondon and I think Virilio, and offer some critiques. But I think the intro gets at some things that are helpful in understanding how, from a leftist Marxist perspective, we can think about automated technology. The point of which, again, isn't to say that these things are inherently good because Marx or someone that read Marx said so. It's just to say that our thinking on this needs to go beyond good, bad, ethical, unethical, all in, all out. So he starts the piece by saying, in Fragment on Machines, that's the excerpt from the Grundrisse I've taught all over the internet. So if you want to read this, you can just, if you Google Marx Fragment on Machines, you'll find it. Shout out technology. Marx made the case that with investment in automated technology, which he called fixed capital, capitalism is able to reduce necessary labor time and increase both surplus and labor value. So again, fixed capital, automated technology that produces value without extracting human labor, reduces labor time and increases the value of that labor. Marx then speaks of the possibility of sublating surplus labor to free time, which he understood as both idle time and time for higher activity. So the point is, for Marx, he wants to consider the idea that fixed capital can create the economic or technological conditions to accomplish the productive goals of our society in a way that alleviates human labor time. In a very basic way, think about people like the autonomy research group in the UK. It's when people advocate for the 4-day work week. A lot of that involves people being like, hey, we have the technology to do X, Y, and Z, or if you're in the UK, X, Y, and Z, to alleviate those 8 hours that person would do, but still get just as much done, so we can pay them the same wage and they have to work less. Similar stuff there. And we know what normally happens in our society, of course, because we live under ruthless capitalism, is if technology helps us work less, they just give us more work to do. This speculation in which a type of labor corresponding to a capitalist mode of production disappears is predicated on new technological developments. And that's another thing as well. Like it gets complicated to be a crass Luddite and someone who is advocating for a type of communist or socialist future. I'm not saying it's impossible. Again, I like a lot of aspects of degrowth, but it's a tough circle to square sometimes. Within the concept of free time, Marx envisions a communist emancipation of the subject, since free time transforms its possessor into a different subject, who then enters into the direct production process as this different subject. I'm going to make a video on this at some point. I just haven't figured out how to do it the right way. One of the things I think about constantly is time, and how it's like we don't have time. You know what I mean? Like we just don't have time, and it feels like time is fleeting, and time is this resource that we increasingly have less and less access to. And so many of the mechanisms in our society, many of which use these sorts of technologies, operate largely by appropriating that time from us, or taking our time and turning it from time that could be genuinely productive in a human sense or leisure time into this empty time, I was thinking about this. When was this? I forget exactly where it was. Maybe I saw, this is really going to bother me. I'm sorry that I'm forgetting this anecdote. But there was something I saw recently where I saw, maybe it was like a community theater production. Where would I have done that? What was I doing where I was at a community theater? Not that there's anything wrong with that. But I remember I had the thought that was like, this is good that some people in some places have time to do things like community theater art projects or community service projects or craft projects that are just like a fun thing to do that affirms their humanity and the humanity of those around them without any like productive capacity attached to it. That's all I was trying to say. That's all I was trying to say right there. This idea resonates with Marx and Engels' famous lines in the German ideology, in which they state that within a communist society, it is possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. It's so alpha. Everyone thinks that commies are betas, but Marx and Engels are like, you got to fish, you got to hunt, you got to rear cattle. You know, rearing cattle. We all know what that means. With this utopian image in mind, we should not confuse free time with play. And this is important both in like the Marxist and the Aristotelian tradition, that time is something, the point isn't to structure society such that we can hang out all day, because that's just like, isn't that what Wally's about? It's to use that time to further embrace and support our own humanity. Now, this piece, like I said before, goes on to criticize some of that and say that there's other ways we can look at technology in a political sense. My only point here, my only big idea, my only thing I want to point you all towards is we have to be able to contemplate the emancipatory usage of technology in the service of humanity, while also acknowledging that the way in which many of these technologies currently operate do so in ways that are dehumanizing and destructive to both our human selves and the environment which we necessitate to sustain our human life. And that it's more interesting, theoretically and practically, to think big and to think in utopian terms sometimes about what it would mean to utilize technology to serve human ends. Because if we don't, we might not think about it in these terms, but the ends that are served by most modern forms of technology are just the ends of capital. Technology is used to sort of extract the most labor, time, and value from humans, and then produce the most value for the people that own those technologies. And this is one of the biggest problems with LLMs, right? And we've talked about this, and some of you said this, and some of you guys said this in the chat as well. I think where I was going with that, I don't know. I'm just gonna respond to this comment that I just saw. God, I was probably gonna cook. I was probably gonna cook so hard. Leninware AI said the fight for free time is therefore not separate from the fight for justice. It's one of its pillars. The struggle goes until every worker has not merely the time to live, but the time to flourish. Damn. Yeah, I think a version of that, right? That's kind of what we're getting at here. But we know that right now, the way in which the stuff operates is exploitative and bad. And we have to be able to imagine a way in which technology can serve our humanity. And I think a sort of like Ludditism is not going to help do that. And it's not going to be enough. If anyone could figure out where I was going before, then let me know. Oh, Leninware just cooked me. Leninware just cooked me by using AI to do that. I'm going to leave that quote up on the screen for a while now. I'm gonna leave that up on the screen for a while now. Aoife says in the chat, everyone keeps saying ChatGPT lies all the time. It isn't actually useful. How do Fatima find it more useful than Google? I kind of worry that that's just a thing that people say. Like, there are examples, tons of them, of ChatGPT being nuts. In the video that we've been talking about today, I showed the example from the Eddie Burback video where ChatGPT acts fucking crazy to him. But I think that sometimes like says stuff that's normal. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I don't know what Ubuntu is, but I can look it up. Some very good writers on it: Fred Lee Hort and Moten B. Ramos' philosophy of Ubuntu. Okay, I'm just gonna look that up right now before I forget what it is. Hopefully, it's not a. Okay, a humanistic community-centered approach to teaching. Okay, I'll look that up later. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Um, Dead Noodle in the chat says again, I think people forget Luddites were the artisans and experts who were concerned with the human ethics, not anti-technology. But yeah, it's probably not enough to stop things. And that's the point as well. Often we might talk about what it means to be a Luddite or Ludditism in a way where it's like, oh yeah, they broke the machines because they thought the machines were bad and they didn't like the machines anymore. Where I think, in fact, the way we need to think about that is they were destroying the machines because those machines were dehumanizing those artisans, craftsmen, and laborers. And I mean, think about it this way too. I'm bouncing around here, but I think it all makes, we'll connect it all together. Imagine what would happen if the artisans themselves, the artisans themselves were in control of technology. What would happen if, rather than the artisan being exploited by the person that owns the technology, the person who can't do shit but owns a machine, what if instead artisans had technological capacity to figure out how they could best do things? Because, for example, when I've been in settings before where AI usage has come up in a professional setting, it is never being used by artistic or creative people. It's being hoisted upon creative people by uncreative ghouls. You know, because there's ways you could have conversations where someone says, you know, well, hey, for this academic artist or whoever, how could you use AI? How could this technology support the work you're doing? But instead, it's someone else saying, hey, let me just dehumanize the crap out of you because I'm going to teach computer how to do your job so that computer has job and that you don't have job, or that now you work for computer instead. Hey, thanks for watching this. In case you didn't know, I have a main channel where I post video essays and stuff like that. It's just called Michael Burns. There's a link. Would love for you to check that out. If you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon. You can also hit up either of my beverage partners. There's Yes Please Coffee, who make the best gosh darn coffee in the world. You get 15% off with the code Burns Beans. And of course, my beloved new non-alcoholic beer sponsor, Years Beers. It's really good. There's a link below, and if you use it, you get 10% off your first order. So thank you so much. And if you ever want to watch these streams live, I'm live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. Okay, now now it's really over. So now you can go. I'm going to finish this. Now it's over. I'll see you guys for the next one.